Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Thursday morning webinar. I am Chloe Tetro. I am the coaching lead here with Ready Care. For this morning, we're going to be looking at the topic of imposter syndrome. I'm going to run through a brief few bits around it. So how the brain fuels self-doubt, how it's all in your head. I'm just kidding. How to overcome it, and why feelings are the last to change, because oftentimes people will come and say, I feel like an imposter. I'd love to stop feeling this way. So I'm going to just chat a little bit around the feelings aspect of things and how to actually do the domino knock-on effect of targeting the feelings through the thoughts, and finish up with a few practical steps around moving on with your life as this new hugely confident person that will take on the day every single day. So imposter syndrome, or another way that it's called, is the imposter phenomenon. Syndrome is much easier to pronounce though. It is a psychological pattern in which individuals will feel like frauds. So they will feel like the hiring manager just let me slip through the cracks. I don't know how I got here, and everyone's going to find out. Or, I'm doing great at my degree, but everyone could do great at their degree. And actually, I'm doing a lot worse than people seem to think I am, even though I'm testing well. All of that kind of malark. So they will think that they're frauds. They will think that they're not worthy of their successes, even though there's clear evidence of competence and accomplishments. So they'll often believe that successes are due to outside luck or multiple external factors. So the hiring manager made a mistake. That person can't notice that I'm bad at work because they're too busy with their own job. So all of these outside factors, rather than actually look to themselves and say, well, I seem to have the abilities for it. So it's extremely common, and actually the most common in high achievers. And research suggests that up to 70% of people experience imposter syndrome at some point in their life. And, a lot will experience imposter syndrome for most of their life. You take the likes of Maya Angelou, who, for her whole life thought people are going to find out, book after book after book. This one is the one that people are going to go, she's not worthy of these accolades. So it's this persistent feeling of fraudulence can have real world impacts and consequences, like anxiety at work, burnout, and the biggest one really is inhibited personal growth. So what that would be is really not taking chances, holding yourself back constantly. And it can take an awful long time for someone to really understand that that's what's happening. And at that point, they can look back on specific opportunities and go, jeepers, why didn't I just go for it? So the key to overcoming it lies in understanding, I think, it lies in understanding the psychological mechanisms that fuel these feelings and learning strategies to reframe those. And the reason why I always like to give the nuts and bolts of what's happening under the hood is I really, truly believe that, from experience working with hundreds and hundreds of people over the years, that once we know that there is a mechanism at play here, and that every single thing that's gone wrong ever in our lives perceivably are not just down to our total lack of abilities of being a functioning human being, but actually an awful lot of the feelings of dis-ease, a psychological dis-ease that we can get trapped in particular loopings around, have very specific mechanisms that unfortunately and fortunately we have evolved over time to protect us, that sometimes have a tendency to malfunction in our gorgeous 21st century life. So why I like to really give a background on what's happening there is to give you a level of choice back in things. So imposter syndrome, it's fundamentally tied to how our brain processes our self-relevant information, our self-referential system. It's how we view ourselves, our abilities, and our achievements. So you've lots of different brain regions involved in this, but they're basically responsible for evaluating our self-worth and integrating what's called feedback. So we see something, we feed it back, it becomes part of our centrifuge of how we view ourselves. So the self-referencing systems help us to assess whether our actions align with our internal sense of self, because one thing about the brain is it loves continuity. It loves that level of balance. So things usually have to align outside with what we think inside. So when we experience imposter syndrome, then on the flip side, the self-referencing systems become a little bit skewed. And instead of recognizing the success as a reflection of our effort, our skill, our capabilities, we'll attribute that to external factors like luck, timing, HR manager asleep at the wheel, and that will lead to what's called cognitive dissonance. So continuity is not quite there, the balance is a little bit skewed, and that creates a mental conflict where our internal belief that we are that we are inadequate clashes with external evidence of our competence. So what happens then is we get flooded with all this anxiety and self-doubt, and that makes us feel hugely unworthy and of our successes and the life that we've built around ourselves. And this reinforces the idea that we're just pretending or faking it because we're trying to make sense of this story. We're trying to make sense of this cognitive dissonance. So the way to regain some of that power back when the brain is feeling skewed and all the systems are going dirk, 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 something's wrong, something's off, we have to place a story on it. Sorry, my eye is watering here. I'm not just really emotional about the brain. And the way that we do that is go for the easiest story. So we feel all this stress, we feel all this cognitive dissonance. So the brain then tries to resolve it by distorting our self-perception instead of the other way around. For example, when we receive praise and acknowledgement, instead of internalizing it, we brush it off. It's a coincidence, it's a nice day. I don't know if it was a fluke. And that distances ourselves more and more from the reality of our own achievements. So this cycle becomes reinforced over time because remember, with the brain, every time there's a repetition, every time there's a pattern, it gets further and further embedded as this is the truth. So that cycle becomes reinforced and it creates what's known as a feedback loop that makes us feel like a fraud even when evidence suggests otherwise. So not really a fun time. But knowing that that's part of the mechanism and that that's at play every single day with us is a very, very good way of starting to overcorrect. It's like if you'd a bike and one of the handlebars was slightly out of whack, the bike will start to go all over the place. So there's a necessity to slightly overcorrect so that you can actually get in a straight line through your day. So to overcome imposter syndrome, there needs to be a change in thought patterns because remember, the patterning is what is causing things to go a little bit off kilter in the first place. And that means actively retraining the brain's self-referencing systems. So there's a glitch in the matrix with the self-referencing system. Say that 5 times fast. And knowing about it helps us to overcorrect. Like if you have a cold, or if you're feeling sick and there's a small glitch in your energy systems, the last thing most sane people will do is say, look, I'll go for a run in the rain, that'll cure me. It's like, no, there's a necessity to overcorrect, i.e. you should probably rest a little bit more. So feelings of inadequacy don't disappear overnight, unfortunately, but shifting the way we think about them can really reduce their power. So a few little bits that can help with regards shifting those things back into a kind of cognitive continuum that's going to serve you. So reframing is a massive one now. I'm never a fan of self-gaslighting, as in if you're just being totally delusional, own that. But one of the most effective ways to combat imposter syndrome is actually looking at your negative thoughts and seeing, are these really what I think that they are? And I remember Chloe talking about that little glitch in the matrix. Is this what's happening here? Am I really actively reinforcing a thought that's going to make me feel bad and have a really negative impact on my day? So the brain is wired to respond to perceived threats with negative self-talk. But if you use reframing techniques, it can really disrupt this cycle. So the goal is to identify when you have an automatic negative belief. So something that you haven't really had to try to come to, I'll never amount to anything in this world. If you have a pattern of saying something like that over and over in your head at specific areas, or I'm not qualified for this job, or I'll never get a promotion because I'm rubbish, or all of these different things. The goal is to identify when something's just popped in that's quite negative and you go, oh, that seems like it's one of these particular automatic thoughts, and try replacing them with something a bit more balanced, something a bit more realistic. So when you think to yourself something like, I don't deserve this success, spot it and challenge it by asking yourself, what specific evidence do I have that tells me this? And a great thing about catching yourself in the act like that is automatic thoughts don't turn on your prefrontal cortex. That's why they're automatic. They're further out. Prefrontal cortex thinking, which is your adult brain that rationalizes and weighs up different things, takes up an awful lot of energy in the brain, and the brain goes, look, if we can automate some of this, I know they were happy enough repeating this thought over and over and over, so they must, that must ring true. It's not going to take up any energy, so we're going to throw it out in the forefront. If you catch yourself and if you ask yourself a question, whatever that question may be, but if you catch yourself saying, I don't deserve this success, bam, there it is, automatic thought. I'm catching myself and I'm asking a question. In asking the question, you are now engaging your prefrontal cortex. So it can be a challenge directly of that thought. It can be things like, what might the opposite of this thought look like? And the goal here is not just to, as I said, gaslight yourself into things. The goal here is to catch an automatic thought, replace it with a question. When you replace it with a question, your prefrontal cortex comes on. When your prefrontal cortex comes online, you are now able to be an adult. You're able to actually weigh up, wait, hang on a minute, what is happening here? Do I actually have evidence of this? Or am I just falling into this spiral thinking, feeling kind of mush where I feel bad and I'm looking for evidence of why I feel bad constantly? And that's where the cycle of that can go. So activating that prefrontal cortex is going to help you to be able to take a zoomed out approach, give yourself some evidence, get a degree of emotional self-regulation back into things. What some people do is they keep a record of their successes very privately on the back end of a notebook for yourself. Give yourself a list of those as soon as it happens, if you know that you're somebody prone to imposter syndrome. And the thought process here is to basically, it's like meal prepping for a day that you're too tired to eat. You're basically giving yourself a bank of nourishment for the days that you're feeling a bit depleted. And when you feel something like one of those thoughts come in, give yourself that written evidence of, no, I'm gone into one here. I've gone into one of these feedback loops. I can see there's evidence. Okay, priming your system a little bit more for those. So self-affirmations, same type of thing. Again, it's not telling yourself you're an astronaut. If you're not, I mean, maybe somebody here watching is an astronaut, and but it's basically affirming your core strengths. Affirm. People do them all the time. Lots of athletes, high performers will give themselves particular affirmations, and they will boost your self-confidence. Even if you have to drag your heels doing it the first couple of times, the first couple of days, they'll become part of your routine. And you'll see, if you're ever interested in these, have a look at some of these athletes that there's a particular lady whose name I can't remember right now, so why did I bring her up? But anyway, she makes it part of her image to say something along the lines of, I can do anything that I want. And she encourages other people to step into gyms, step into sports practices by utilizing this affirmation. And people have said over and over and over, when they started all of their workouts, and any time that they were having, in those moments where you're like, ugh, by saying, I can do anything that I want, I can do anything that I set my mind to, those types of things, performance actually goes up. And there's lots and lots of studies to show affirmations boost performance. So actionable in your kind of day-to-day office life, or whatever the work situation may be, is to really give yourself a particular affirmation of your core strengths, things that you know that you're very good at. Pop them in a sentence, pop them in a sentence or two for that particular day, and just make a habit. Try it for a week, Try it for 2 weeks. 2 weeks is ideal. Give yourself 2 weeks of saying that every day, at least once a day, but multiple times a day would be even better. And see, can you notice a difference in your performance, in your behaviors, in how you show up at work? Very good little experiment for yourself. The other thing is understanding as well that you can't be good at everything. I know it's like, oh, don't tell me that. Oh. You can't be good at everything. And a huge differentiating factor that, let me just find the lady's name, Valerie Young. She's brilliant, brilliant lady who specializes in imposter syndrome. And she's got great talks online if anybody is interested. Valerie Young is her name. One of the key differences that she's noticed in her lifetime of research around imposter syndrome is that basically people who don't feel imposter syndrome, that golden unicorn 30% of people out there, is they don't think like imposters. They think, well, I wasn't good at that, but, check out this bit I did. I can't be good at everything, or it's not the end of the world. They don't ally particular failures or particular shortcomings in their skill set with a degree of shame. People that feel imposter syndrome, a degree of shame comes up when they're incapable of reaching this impossible standard of I have to be perfect or else. So adopting that growth mindset, the knowledge that if you're not good at something that you've just started, that's normal. If you make the odd mistake at something that you should be at this stage, 10 years down the line, super proficient in, the odd mistake, that is also normal. So instead of feeling that I failed, therefore I'm not good enough, it's adopting a thought pattern that will say, I failed because I'm still learning, or I can use this to improve, or what happened, without that kind of shame spiral that goes along with it. Because the shame spiral, the feelings aspect of things, is going to trigger your brain to keep looking for reasons why you feel like this. So you might get an initial spike in feelings. Oh, I didn't like that. That wasn't nice. Recognizing, okay, I'm having a moment, parking it is a lot better than going, oh, I feel terrible. And then your feelings will cascade and your brain, looking for continuity again, will keep looking for reasons why the feelings are getting worse and worse and worse. So there, it's starting to pick out loads and loads of evidence from your life of why you should feel shame. And it will look for that evidence of rightful shame, whereas the opposite is what we want. We want to acknowledge that, yeah, people generally don't like failing at things. They don't like mucking up in a meeting. They don't like saying the wrong thing. They don't like admitting that they don't have this total circle of, hermetically sealed skill sets that are impenetrable, like Fort Knox. Not everybody's good at everything. It's okay to admit that. So why feelings are the last change? And I've kind of touched on it there for a sec. So the feelings aspect is the part that upsets most people. I didn't mean that to be a terrible joke, but look. So one of the critical ways to understand, or one of the critical things to understand about imposter syndrome is that feelings will be the last thing to change. So if you feel like an imposter, that feeling is usually the thing that takes the longest time to change. The way you feel about yourself won't shift immediately. And the key to overcoming that feeling is changing your thoughts first. Because on the hierarchy of things, feelings are below thoughts. So you can change the way you feel by changing the way that you think, because thoughts, as we were saying a second ago, if you think those thoughts, your brain is looking to make you correct. So it's going to get into its bank of feelings and it's going to try and match that. It's always trying to match things up. So thoughts will shape your feelings. And when you change your thinking patterns, the emotional experience begins to shift too. So you can't control your feelings right away is a big thing to just sit with for a while. It can take a few days. So when people say fake it till you make it, there's an aspect of that is right when you think about neuroplasticity and reframing your thoughts, because you've essentially had your entire life of thinking a particular loop pattern. It will be more difficult to break out of it in the beginning stages. So beginning stages, you can feel a bit dorky, saying particular affirmations, thinking particular thoughts that don't seem to match, but watch how it starts to match over 2 weeks. And if you do the 2 weeks of thinking the thoughts, feeling the feelings, and see no difference whatsoever, I give you full permission to message me and say that didn't work. But it absolutely should work. So you won't be able to change them right away, but you can start with your thoughts and they will start to change your emotional landscape. So instead of saying, I feel like an imposter, and allowing that feeling to dominate your actions, reframe it as a temporary moment. And I can't stress this enough. Rather than take the mantle of I am, right? So rather than internalizing it and making it part of your self-referential framing, which is, if you think about it, it's like the core reactor of who you believe yourself to be. Your whole system is constantly going to try to prove you right. Whatever those messages are, it is constantly going to try to prove you right because of that desire for continuity. So if you start to say, this is a moment, I'm having a shameful moment, I'm having an imposter moment, it doesn't define me. I'm recognizing it. Shifting from thinking of it in terms of moments to who you are and having a life full of that is a monumental way to get control over this again. I'm having a moment. This is not who I am. And recognizing that, it will become quicker and quicker and quicker to shift yourself out of these moments. I'll finish up now with a few practical bits. Where am I? Down here. And if there's questions or comments at any point, let's do pop them in. So to kind of summarize what we're saying. So building self-assurance in who you are at your core self requires consistent practice and intentional shifts, because unfortunately, getting to where you are now, a lot of that has come up automatically with behaviors and thoughts that you've never sat and questioned. So you've just taken them on and they have repeated over years and years and years and become more and more ingrained. So there's that initial little bit of energy that's required at the start. So understand your strengths, understand your worth insofar as, be it in a job environment, relationship environment, family environment, whatever it may be that you're feeling that degree of imposter around. Give yourself that bank. And like I know I'm thinking of people I know in my life, if I said that to them, they'll find it the cringiest thing on the planet, but I promise that it works, is give yourself a bank of successes, give yourself a bank of things that you know that you're good at on a day that you're feeling good about things. Or as they happen. As something good happens, pop it in that little notebook for yourself. What you're going to get is basically a playlist of lots of things that are going to bypass that initial feeling of shame, and it's going to switch the gears of your thought pattern and your feeling pattern. So having that on hand and knowing that, I use the analogy, it's like meal prepping for a day you don't have any food in the house. Having that on hand and knowing what your strengths are is going to be a huge, huge practical tool for yourself. You can ask for constructive feedback if you are in a work environment where people speak about imposter syndrome. Studies show that it actually diminishes the power of it. The more people speak about this, the greater it becomes manageable. And there's this big kind of dichotomy, particularly in the Irish psyche, but probably in other places as well, that we seem to think we only have two options. We can either say, I have imposter syndrome, accept it, maybe I'm not good, this, that, and the other thing. Or we think that we are this massive, arrogant person, right? And those seem to be the only two options, that either we say, sure, I'm nobody, this, that, and the other, and keeping yourself in check constantly, or you become this egotistical maniac. That's a huge cognitive error. It does not have to be just those two things. Somewhere in the middle might be nice, where you're somebody that says, yeah, I'm not the be all and end all, but I'm very good at what I do, and I don't chastise myself when I'm not good at everything all of the time. So knowing your strengths, having a success bank, having something that affirms your strengths to yourself most days. Try to come up with a sentence is best, but two is fine as well, but nothing very, very long, that condenses all of the values and traits and strengths that you know that you bring. Repeat those to yourself, whether it be in the car, if you're driving by yourself, or maybe not. In the mirror, if you're having a moment, just say it to yourself mentally. those affirmations will start to seep into how you view yourself. Because if you say, I'm exceedingly capable, right? And that's your little affirmation, I'm exceedingly capable. If that is in the forefront of your mind, same mechanism is going to come into play with continuity. Your brain is going to actively look for evidence that you're extremely capable. In the same way that if you tell yourself constantly, God, I'm so incapable, your brain is going to go, okay, that's the message. Let's look for some evidence, because we're looking to make the outside fit the inside. So once you recognize this mechanism, things get an awful lot easier. There is a degree of patience needed with it because it doesn't happen overnight. And I'd say give yourself the 2 weeks with it, because it really can make a profound impact on your experience of how you show up. Like if you feel like you don't deserve to be somewhere every single day for a year, for 2 years, for longer than that, it will profoundly impact your self-worth, your self-confidence, your ability to take opportunities, the ability to like yourself as much as you should, the ability to connect to your peers, because you'll end up shying away or trying not to be found out. So, not speaking an awful lot, not connecting with people as much. So imposter syndrome doesn't have to be a lifelong struggle. When you understand the kind of neuropsychological mechanisms and implement strategies like the ones we chatted about, it can really help to break free from that self-doubt and build a degree of authentic self-assurance. Not delusional self-assurance, but authentic self-assurance. So remember, the key here is change your thoughts first, and that will eventually lead to shifts in your emotions and a shift in your behaviors. Feelings will follow thoughts. And if you consistently shift your mindset, you rewire your brain with the neuroplasticity bits we talk about, it will get more and more ingrained, and you won't even have to give it the amount of effort that you have to at the beginning stages. You'll rewire your brain for confidence, resilience, and self-worth. So thank you for joining me today, guys, and I hope you found this helpful, our little imposter syndrome chat. Have a lovely rest of your week, and I believe Andrew will be back with you next week. And practice those affirmations. See you next time. Bye.